Okay, so good afternoon to everyone, and from Canna Corporate, Netherlands. Thank you for joining us here for this role policy module presentation. I would be making an attempt to give you a small preview into the business case that led to the development of this role policy module. I hope you can all see the screens. So. All right, let me start with a very quick intro on Canna. Canna is a producer of nutrients and growing mediums for the cultivation for plants. And from an IT perspective, we are passionately driven by the open source philosophy, and hence Odoo and OCA. So that's why we're here. Just to take you into the opportunity, just a brief moment into what prompted us to go in for this new module, which we call it the role policy module. We all know that change is imperative, right? And it's about an IT has to keep up with the business agility. So there are a few factors that actually influenced us when we started this our recent Odoo 13 migration. The first factor that, of course, was in question was the frequent requests for role changes. And as you can see that our security and internal controls are also pretty intricate, which means we need a kind of an in-depth tool to help us, give access to business on various levels. And then we all know what speed of change means, because in the IT world, if business wants something, it's always yesterday. So we need to look at something, how we can implement frequent role changes pretty fast. We are also aiming for a kind of a self-service environment. Add that to the complexity of geographical locations. So we have sales offices across the world. And how do we deal with an account manager who's different in the US versus an account manager who's different in Netherlands, for example? Some of the most frequent things that we receive are temporary role and cross-functional requests. So somebody needs to do A and B. So how do we manage that in a particular location? And of course, one of the most pressing issues is the existing challenges that we face with the current role setup in Odoo. So I'll just get into that a little more in depth. What are the challenges? So if you look at the challenges, standard Odoo roles is less intricate, which means with the standard the Odoo role matrix, we can do enough, but not as agile as what the business wants, which means that leads us to a lot of customization, right? And in the recent migration that we did, we found out that more than 40% of our change requests were role related. And that's a lot of work when it comes to actually implementing a solution or going for a migration, because every time some button needs to change, the whole process of the development lifecycle starts. And just because of this whole list of change requests that we have, we always have to focus on the high priority ones, which means even at the end of your project, you still have roles that's not been catered to, or you still have minor, less important roles or requests, which is always left over as a backlog. Now look at the effort of regression testing. Any major role change that happens in the system, the cycle of regression testing is very high, because end of the day, you don't want a buggy software to go into the hands of users, especially when you are spread across the world. So it's so important that we have to spend a lot of time on regression testing. And be prepared for a very, very good rollback plan, because if something goes wrong, we need to be rolled back soon. And then from an auditor's or from an analysis point of view, we were not able to perform the current state of analysis. Like, for example, if you've developed a lot of customized code for role and policy matters, it's not very easy to pull out an out of state report. So for auditing and for other analysis purpose, it gets quite difficult. So that's when we listed out, with a lot of brainstorming, we listed out a set of objectives that we need to meet with this role policy module. The first one was a clean Odoo UI interface to manage intricacies. Reduction in lead time from request to implementation. Very easy validation and rollback if it's possible. And supporting all Odoo modules and roles. And then, of course, which we discussed in the previous slide, ability to audit and report. And also, very importantly, is to handle the complexity of the business requirement. In short, to reduce development efforts. So that was our main objective, which we forecast would save anywhere between 40 to 50% when it comes to role management. Quickly, I'll get into my role is kind of over here, so I'll get into the credits. Just a short note on our credits, which means that I'd like to just say that we're very happy and extremely proud to have partnered with Noviat for this role policy module. So as you can see, Luc de Meyer has been instrumental as our chief architect in this role policy module. Els van Vossel has been really helpful in setting up our functional goals for this role. And now for the sponsorship. Canna sponsored this development for the last couple of months. We've been working on this. This has been a part of our larger Odoo 13 migration project, which we have been assisted by our other Odoo partners, namely OneStein, Serpent, Camp2Camp, and Startex. But for the role policy module, it's always been Noviat that's actually architected and developed this policy for us. You're also welcome to follow us on our GitHub, which is github.canna.ict. Here you will have almost all our recent efforts. So please stay tuned for 2021 as well, because we're going to come back with some more interesting features. With this, thank you very much. And I leave it to Els now. And thank you for the OCA and its members for sustaining and supporting all community initiatives. And we're proud to be part of that. Els, now over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. For my own sake of mind, I recorded the demo this morning. It's all very well working, but I have a bit of a cold, so I did not want to start coughing all the time. So I will share my screen and present the demo. I would like to propose to wait for questions until after Luc also presents his slides, because he will answer a lot of technical questions just by presenting. And afterwards, we will also be available on Discord for any other questions you might have. Hello and welcome to the Role Policy app. By default, when you install a new module in Odoo, a user has access to that module. The Role Policy app is a game changer in the sense that as long as no specific access rights for that module have been granted to a certain role, users in that role will not have access to the module. To show you an example, you see a number of roles that will be used in our database. They are all empty for now. I will show you the Data Maintenance Officer. As you see, he has no access rights at all. So I will show you what he can see in the database. I log in, I click, and even when I try to find modules here, you will see that the DM has no access at all. The Role Policy app allows you to define these roles through the user interface or by importing a spreadsheet. To start, it may be best to just add all the things you need here. For example, add a line on menu item level. Here you can select detailed menus. You don't have to apply the complete sales order to a rule, but you can just select, for instance, customers or products. So if you add them here, then you can easily export your result. For the demo, I already created a spreadsheet for the database manager. So on an ACL level, you simply add the model and then you define the read, write, create, delete access. You can activate a rule or you can delete an entry on import. When defining a spreadsheet, you don't have to define the name. It will be applied automatically when you import it here. When you export the spreadsheet again, it will attribute the name in your spreadsheet. Of course, you can also do this manually. On the menu item level, you just add the external identifier that you find in IR menu. If you do it manually, no need to know anything about external identifiers. So you just add all the tab pages. You see that the number of tab pages in my spreadsheet is equal to the number of tab pages in my database. For the view modifier rules, I will explain you in the demo in more detail. So let's start by importing the data maintenance rule. I can either import sheet per sheet, which is handy when you have made some changes and you only need to import one sheet. But since we have no access rights at all, I will import all sheets at once. While importing, the system will test, and suppose that you have added a rule for an MRP module which is not installed on your system, then the system will throw you an error message, and it will import all the tab pages without errors, and it will just allow you to change the spreadsheet for the tab, and then you can import that sheet only. Let me explain you some more about view modifier rules and what the power of these rules can be. I return to my database. I refresh. And you see that I have all the modules that I have added to my rule. In the sales, as explained before, I have a limited number of menus. I don't have, for instance, sales orders or quotations, because my data maintenance officer is not allowed to access. I open my customer, I click Edit, and I see that my VAT number is a mandatory field. I also notice that my customer is a company. Now, what will happen if I click on individual? My VAT field is no longer mandatory. Now, that's an easy one to set up. Let me explain how I did that. I go back to my rule. I click on the model, and in the contact model, I defined the element field name equals VAT. On the required level, I added a domain company type equals company. And this is how it is set up. I have also applied a number of inactive rules, and I will show you by going to products that my data maintenance officer has access to reordering rules. Now, I don't want the data maintenance officer to have access to reordering rules. I want to keep that for the warehouse manager. So what I need to do is hide this button. Now, how do I do that? I look for the button in the view. The model is a product template, that I know. And I look for the number of reordering rules in the view. So I end up in the product template procurement view, and I see that the button does not appear once, but appears twice. So I want to hide the button in both cases. Now, how do I do that? I go to my data maintenance view. I select my inactive buttons, and here I add the model product template because this is the one we are talking about. I add the product template procurement view. The form type will automatically be proposed. And in the elements, I add two XPath expressions. One to say that the first occurrence has to be invisible, and another one to say that the second occurrence has to be invisible. I activate both rules. I click Save. I return to my data maintenance. I click Refresh. I open my product, and the Reordering Rules button is gone. On the product level, I notice that I don't have a price in my Kanban view, but I have the price label. Now that's a bit ridiculous. So I want to hide the price label. How do I do that? I look in my views, which I already did here, so I select my inactive rules. The element printing the price in the Kanban view is ULLI, so I add the XPath here, and I activate my rule. I click Save. I return to my data maintenance officer. I refresh, and the price label is gone. You might have noticed that we also talk about view type attributes and view model operations. Now, what is the difference between the two? View model operations are defined on a model basis, so for a complete object or for all objects by using default. View type attributes allow you to hide attributes on a main view level, so it allows you to change, to override attributes of the main view. I will show you what it looks like in my database. So here on the product level, I see the import button. I see it on the Kanban view. I also have it on the list view or the tree view. So I go back to my view model operations because on the default level, I want the import to be hidden for my data maintenance officer. So I add default. I select import. Disable is activated by default. I save. I go back. I refresh my screen. And I see that my import button is gone on the tree view, but also on the Kanban view. I can also make exceptions. Here I have hidden the archive option on a default level, meaning that my data maintenance officer will not be allowed to archive records. But of course, I want my data maintenance officer, who is responsible for creating and maintaining products, to be able to archive products. So I add an exception on the model product template saying that archive is allowed. I will show you what this looks like. So I open the product, I click on the action, and I have the archive attribute. I will show you that on a customer level, I open a customer form and I don't have the archive action. As a DM, I did not add any ACL for account tax. But of course, my data maintenance officer needs to be able to add taxes to products, for instance. So I open the product, I click Edit, and on a customer tax level, for instance, I see that my data maintenance officer has created an edit rights. I click, and a message pops up saying that I am not allowed to view this information. That is because no ACL has been defined. This is yet another powerful option of our role policy app. Now I will log out as data manager, and I will import another role to show you the power of model methods. Let me import sales inbound employee for you. I will import all the sheets because I have no access rights at all. The same test on errors is applied. As you see, I have no model methods. Model methods can be defined in the system, so there it requires a bit of development. And in the module, we have added the method to post. So now we will see that the DM, the SIE, has access to sales orders, for instance, because we want him to be able to create sales orders and also to invoice them. But because he has no model method defined, he will not be able to post the invoice. I will copy a sales order. I save, I confirm, and I create an invoice. As you see, I have the post button. I'll be posting, but I get a message that my security role does not allow me to do that. Okay, we have to find a solution. So we will edit the sales inbound role and we will add the predefined method allowing us to post. I click Save. I return to my SIE database. I refresh my browser because that's all I have to do. I click on my sales order. I open my invoice. The post button is still there. I post. Et voilà, I am able to post the invoice. So that is some of the power of the Role Policy app that I wanted to demonstrate you in a quarter of an hour. So that's it for my demo. I would like to go over to Luc, and please save your questions until after Luc's slide presentation. Thank you for your attention from my part.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Luc. Can you speak? Do you have your microphone open? I think, Luc, you're muted. Just a moment. Let me unmute you. Okay.
Is it working now?
Yes, it's fine now.
Okay. So I made a couple of slides to actually unveil what's under the hoods of this application. So basically, when you install the application, we use one of the standard install hooks within Odoo to remove all standard groups from a user at install time of this module. And at that point in time, no user can do anything anymore, or nearly nothing. Also views, we will dynamically remove all groups from views at view rendering time. So when you load the view in your user interface, all groups are removed. And then actually we replace it by the mechanism we have seen actually in the demonstration from else. So basically, since the user does have no standard group anymore, he doesn't have any ACL, he doesn't have any menu item, no action binding and so on. So we actually replace it by the ones in the roles. So that's really it. From a technical standpoint, we didn't really change anything in the Odoo kernel. So basically, whenever you create a role, this role actually becomes a group. And it's basically a standard to the group, but just with a small flag on a Boolean saying it's a role flag. And these are the ones we are using actually, which just mean that you can still use all standard mechanisms. So that if you define under a role group an ACL, this one will become a role ACL, also a standard group, and yeah, that group is actually added to that ACL that we created. So basically, by doing this concept, we don't need to do any change, and everything works as you have seen in the demo. From a security standpoint, we actually working with flat roles. And this is a major change, and does mean that whenever you create a new role, you cannot say, well, I created a role and this role is a combination of role 1 and role 2 and so on, which is a typical concept we use in standard to do, where you have a financial manager who actually has implied the financial, the invoicer and so on. So it's flat, so you need to define everything from the ground up, which just means that whenever you install a new application, that application will not do any change. Or for instance, if you would, which you have with the standard system, if you would change the rights of an underlying role, then you might have unforeseen effects of people inheriting from that role because they start getting extra access rights. So it's fully flat. New applications have nothing. So it does mean if you install, like say, warehousing or install MRP, the existing users don't have anything more. They cannot access it, so you have to define it explicitly. Another thing we have done within Odoo is we make roles company-based. So it does mean that a user can be like the chief financial officer in one company, but be the sales manager in another company if you're in multi-company databases. View modifier rules, I have to say this was the main driver for this customer project, because we have implemented the same role concept in version 8 based on the standard Odoo security mechanism. And that's where actually we ended up with thousands and thousands of lines of XML code in order to basically define small elements on screens. And these small elements on screens then actually got like their own group. And then we can say this screen element basically is added to this role, which was also standard group. And then whenever users like were hitting a notepad page, and then all of a sudden the requirements of the customer change and the notepad page is having 10 fields, and then you want to make it more granular, and from 10 fields, one row has to see 5 of them, the other 5 of them. We really had to break this small group into 2 groups, and then basically we got a lot of work, a lot of complexity, and lots of regressions by maintaining it. So by doing this system, as Els showed it, actually, we don't have the view inheritance. We can just take any view element and we can actually just say, well, this view element becomes in read-only, invisible, and so on. And also from a role policy definition standpoint, we don't need to specify the view. So for instance, if you say the price field is not available for a certain role, it's going to be on all views on that role. We also have another option, which is the remove option. The difference between hide an element or remove is that basically remove means we remove the elements at the server side before we do the ACL check. So basically, if there is a certain information that a user should not have or is even not allowed to have because he doesn't have the ACL, we have to remove it on the back end. So security is higher. A technical person can, in any case, very easily see all the information in hidden fields by just the browser developer mode. But with this, actually, you can't see it because it's just not sent to the screen. But of course, we do see in Odoo that this is a bit delicate in that sense that we may break, or you may break some user interface dialogues like on changes and the main expressions, which will no longer work if we remove the field. So that's the reason why the remove, actually, we do believe that if you define it, you need to think about it, and we made the view actually mandatory. So if you remove an option from the view, you have to do it mandatory, and yeah, the person doing this should be a bit technical. Then we have the view attribute rules, and that's really a very simple one. On the main views, you have options like form create equals false, or edit or delete or duplicate, and all these things. That's really why we wanted to use it for this project, but we implemented more generic. So you could also use like the decorator info or any attribute support from a certain view type. You can just file user interface, modify, and make it rule-based. This one works a little bit in pair with the view model operations that Els showed, in the sense that the view model operations are on all views on a certain method. But if you actually want to override it on a certain view, specific view, then actually those one gets priority. And then the model methods, yeah, actually this is like a kind of a necessity, in the sense that sometimes within Odoo code, we do see that standard security groups from Odoo are hard-coded. For instance, the account move post option is really hard-coded in Odoo, which just means that you cannot execute it in this approach we are having because we remove the standard groups from the user. But we still want people to be able to do this operation. So there actually, we need to make modules like role policy account, role policy sale, role policy purchase, and so on, in order to tackle those parts of Odoo standard modules where actually a group is hard-coded within the logic. Where are we with the project? It's not finished. The main part, as you've seen, has been programmed and it works so far as we know correctly. We actually don't do a lot of syntax checking when making the definitions. So the person's going to the view modifier rule and actually typing in XPath expressions, they may make a mistake and there is no check on it. And we really want to do it because you have seen that the importing and exporting of the rule of the policies is crucial. So we want to have the speed very fast. So one of the things we want to do is have a kind of an offline rule syntax checker with a button so that you can click on it and say, actually, I just want to check if at view rendering time, this XPath rule will work. So that's on the roadmap. Currently, if a user has multiple roles, and that's something we see in any case a lot within the project of the sponsoring customer, let's say a user is being a sales manager, but then someone or a colleague goes on holiday, and then for a certain period of time, he needs to have another role. Then actually we combine the roles, and in the policy, you might have seen sometimes a field called priority, and that's the one which actually decide the winning rule in case of conflicting rules between the roles. One of the things we have on the roadmap is that the user can, like a bit in the multi-company approach, they will be able to select, if you have multiple roles, which of those roles are active in a certain screen dialog. Another very important one is unit tests. Whenever we want to take this one further, without unit test, we are going to break it on a regular basis. And currently, there is no single unit test programmed within this module. Record rules, since every role is having a group, I mean, you can use a standard interface for the record rules, but we really want to add it to the matrix so that it becomes all in one single screen. And then we have a bit of a more nice to have things in the sense that currently the screens are not really adapted. For instance, if in ACL is not there, you will get an error message saying you should belong to sales manager or whatever standard role from Odoo, which we don't remove the standard roles from Odoo from the system. We just remove them from the users. So we need to clean up these error messages and make sure we only show standard error messages which are actually adapted to this role concept. So that's really what we have to do. Also, the user screens and so on still mix and match the standard groups with the role groups. So there is some work to do. And then as a kind of a last point, we also want to add some more traceability to the application so that you can easily see when it's the security manager did some changes to the policies, who did which change at which point in time. Currently, the code is published on the URLs you see here, github.com, ICT, IRP third party. If we see that there is sufficient interest within the OCA, I think this actually deserves an own repo with an own PSC in order to actually move it forward to new releases and develop the roadmap and develop it for other users as the sponsoring project. That's really it for my part.
Thanks, Luke. I think it's a great contribution. I think that there is certainly a room, a space for this tool in the OCA. I think that this would attract a lot of interest. in the OCA in general. I'm not sure. We have some questions. We have anyone willing to send a question? We have 38 participants in this talk. So Bunhin says it's interesting app. I must say, but we developed something similar in the past, I think last year or 2 years ago, but it was not as complete as your approach at all. So I have a question from Yves Goldberg. He asks whether the URL, the GitHub address is correct.
It should be. If there's not typing there, I can actually show the URL physically. So if you see it on my screen, then
no, you're sharing your. Giovanni asks, "Is it working? Giovanni asks, is there any docs out there about that?"
It's documented in the module. So if you look to the README, then it's all documented over here.
Wow, amazing. And
even if how to program like a method like the post method and so on, it's all documented here.
Yeah. It is Bunhins asks, is it working stable enough?
I honestly don't think at this point in time. The intention is that we are actually, so as is currently porting the role policy as we implemented it with the thousands and thousands of lines of XML code in version 8 to version 13. I think it's going to stabilize as soon as we actually start to put real end users. So we have actually planned for the end of the month the first end user testing on it. And then it's going to stabilize, I think, rapidly for the Canna environment. This being said, for instance, the multi-company aspect, which we programmed and designed into it, hasn't gotten any tests. So I do expect as if people start unveiling parts of the functionality which is in there which has not been tested, and no, we have so far not yet started to write a unit test, things will actually have to stabilize. So any help in any case is welcome if there is sufficient interest and if people actually want to contribute as soon as we have a repo then within the OCA.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very sure that the need is there. Obviously, the permissions are very incorrectly managed, I would say, or loosely managed so far. So Giovanni says it's for version 13 only. Yes, and yep. So you confirm that it's you're releasing it in version 13, as you explained. Mark Verstappen agrees that the default permissions are kind of open and agrees with you. Okay, so thank you very much to all of you, to all the team presenting today, and to Els, Van, Vossel, to Luke and Richard. And this has been an amazing talk.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you once again from Canna. Thank you.
Thank you.